All right, that is my cue for us to get started. So once again, I just want to welcome everybody to today's webinar. From all of us on David's team, we genuinely appreciate you being here with us. As many of you already know, David has more than 40 years of experience as a family therapist, workshop facilitator, lecturer, advisor to leadership executives all over the world. He's dedicated his life to helping create leaders, helping them be more accountable and create more authentic organizations. He's also a best-selling author and respected thought leader in the leadership community. David, for anyone who knows him, knows he is so passionate about helping people connect with the most authentic versions of themselves and seeing the world transform one authentic person at a time. Whether he's leading an academy, hosting a webinar, speaking in front of a crowd, or sharing through his written word, David is inspired and fulfilled by the work he does. Today's topic on cultivating trust is one that is so crucial for creating authentic and high-performing workplaces. Today, David's going to share some insights and strategies to help us build trust, not only just at work, but in all aspects of our lives. This webinar is going to be recorded and it will be available on David's YouTube channel, which I will share the link in the chat room. If anybody has questions or comments as we go through the webinar, please post them in the chat room. We'll keep an eye on that throughout. And again, just thank you so much for joining us. It's always inspiring and encouraging to see leaders who are committed to learning and growing and showing up as the most authentic versions of themselves. So with that, here is David. And David, you are on mute. I accidentally muted you. Are you able to unmute yourself? No? Oh no. Okay, we'll see if we can unmute David. I'm going to
There
allow
we
everybody.
go. All
Okay,
right.
wonderful. Oh,
Whoa.
great.
Thank you, Kristen.
Sorry
I'm so
about that. I'm
grateful to
so
have you
sorry.
here. We've upgraded Zoom and you know what upgrades are like, and it's a kind of a different system. So thank you all for joining me. And Kristen, I'm so grateful to have you here. Your energy is amazing. And we're just so grateful whenever you can make the time. So good to be here. So folks, we're going to talk about cultivating trust, the invisible foundation of thriving in communities and organizations. Just so you know, I'm going to take you on a journey today. This is going to be a very personal journey. We're going to spend about at least half the time just reflecting. What does trust really mean? What does it mean to you? What role does it play in your life, in your work, in your personal life? And then we're going to talk about practical strategies, both for positional leaders and for every leader at every level, whether or not you have a title, leadership at every level. How do we create a more healthy, a more trusting workplace and community and life? Okay. And for those of you, I think Kristen mentioned it, I usually talk for about an hour, and then we have a half an hour. If you can stay on afterwards, we talk for about a half an hour, have just a community building, some sharing, question and answers. And people tell us that it's often the best part of the webinar, that last half an hour, if you can stay on. All right. As bees are drawn to nectar, as animals are compelled to migrate, as plants are drawn to grow toward an inch of light, we're drawn to what we most need to learn. This is Mark Nepo. So I've been drawn, it seems like all of my experiences through my own mental health challenges, my own having to deal with anxiety, having to deal with some depression and addiction in my life, and work through a lot of personal issues. I've had to work a great amount of time with this whole area of trust, because I've had to learn how to trust people. I've had to learn how to open myself up, how to ask for help. And so I've invested a great deal in understanding trust without understanding that I was actually building a capacity to teach trust. I do believe that which we are most capable of learning is what we're most in need. What we're most capable of teaching is what we're most in need of developing within ourselves. So this is something that I'm going to be sharing with you at a very personal level from my own personal experience. I want to just acknowledge we wrote a book, my colleague and I hope Jim is on the call. If not, I hope that you'll make it and can stay around afterwards for some conversations. We wrote this book on trust probably 20 years ago, and I really give a lot of credit to Jim for giving me the concept and a lot of the structure and the foundation of my thinking around trust. This book is actually out of print now, but I rewrote that content in my current thinking of trust and rewrote it in this book called The Other Everest. But here's some of my thinking around trust. First of all, let me just get us reflecting on this. Without trust, life as we know it would not exist. We actually operate with trust all the time. And I'm just going to bring this to your awareness. So you can't go into a supermarket. We go into a supermarket. We take for granted we buy this food. And that's actually an act of trust. Somebody has some regulations in our country that says we will not put unhealthy food on our shelves. We buy this food, we trust that it's been grown in a healthy way. We can't cross a bridge without trust. We just automatically know, instinctively, we almost take it for granted that some engineer designed this, that some engineer put a stamp of approval on this that says this bridge has structural integrity. You can't buy a car without trust. We have this trust that the manufacturer who built that car has designed it in such a way that when you push the start button and you start that vehicle, that it's not going to blow up. So we have trust all the time. You turn on the tap water and we trust this is clean water. We actually operate with trust all the time in our lives. You can't go into a skyscraper without some trust that thing isn't going to fall and collapse on top of you. We just take this stuff for granted. And all I'm asking you to do today is to slow down. You can't get on an airplane we put our trust in a pilot. We put a trust in air traffic control. We put our trust in another person when we go into business with them. When we go to a green light, we trust that the red light is on the perpendicular and somebody's going to actually stop at a red light. So here's the thing, folks. It's what I call immature trust. We are born trusting. If you pick up a young child, you will see trust. This baby trusts instinctively. It's innate for us to trust, but I call that immature trust. It's naive trust. It's trust without experience. And at some point in our life, we're going to be betrayed. Somebody's going to let us down. Somebody's going to hurt us. It might be a trauma. Something happens in our life where we get betrayed. And then we move into and then we have a choice. And at some point, we begin to say, I'm not going to trust. And we distrust. I remember working with doing counseling with probably a young lady, probably in her 20s, who said, I am never going to get into a committed relationship again. All men are abusive. And I have been so abused by men, I'm never going to trust another man as long as I live. And this is moving into a place of distrust, totally understandable given her reality. And she wasn't terribly open at that point for me to say, maybe all men aren't, maybe some men might be trustworthy. She wasn't ready to hear that at that point because of the pain that she was in. And to some degree, we all go through some kind of a process of distrust when we've been hurt in any way. And we've lost our naivete as a child. We've lost our innocence. And in some way, it's a shame that that's happened when we lose that sense of an innocent trust. But what we have to recognize that trust is in a trust in waiting. And the task in life is to move from distrust to what I call mature trust. When we don't stay off the roads because people might run a red light, we don't stay off airplanes because of the risk. It's still the safest method of travel. We know this, but we don't hide in our house. I mean, the safest thing to do in your business is just shut it down and all go home. But we have to have mature trust. So when we go through that red light, or go through the red light, when we go through the green light, hopefully we don't go through the red light, when we go through the green light, we can do it wisely. We can do it with defensively so that we can pay attention to the fact of people who might be running a red light, but we still go through it and we take that action. So what mature trust is, it's inner trust, it's wise trust, it's discerning trust, it's responsible risk management. And this is what we want to get to. Now, I want to just share with you in my own marriage. We have a very trusting relationship. We have had 40 years together of a trusting relationship. But I have to tell you, I think probably Val has more trust in our relationship than I do. And that has nothing to do with me. That has to do with the fact that she's more stable. You see, let me draw it this way, and then I want to come back to my marriage example. Mature trust says this, that it's been said that a bird sitting on a branch is never afraid of the branch breaking. That's because her trust is not in the branch, but it's in her wings. This is mature trust. The trust doesn't hold on to the branch. Now, if you have a generation of people who have been raised by strong branches, hey, we put our effort into strengthening the branch, we don't have that inner trust in our wings. And we're going to put more demand on our leaders to build that trust for us because we don't have that sense of inner trust. Now, leaders still have a responsibility. We're going to talk about that, but you'll feel more demand for trust. Or you'll also, if you have a strong branch in your life, but you don't have good wings, you could also be distrustful with branches that have broken before, and you haven't quite got to that stage of developing your own wings fully yet. And the responsibility lies in, hey, how can I strengthen my wings? So that you'll either get, when you have a less than strong wings, when you've been raised with a dependence on a branch, which is understandable at the beginning of our life, but the job of parents is, I digress a little bit here, is to help children build strong wings. But if those wings aren't there, you'll either have higher demand for trust or you'll have more distrust. You'll see those extremes. Fact is, I'd love it if you put in the chat room, and if there's any really insightful insights or insightful thoughts that come through, feel free, Kristen, to interrupt and share what's in the chat room. What's the difference for you between immature trust and mature trust? What's your experience with that? What are your thoughts about that? So I'm going to come back to my marriage for example. Val actually has more trust in we have an amazing trusting relationship, but she has more trust in the relationship than I do. And that's not because of my behavior. It's because of her inner trust. She actually has stronger wings. See, I come from a place where one of my first betrayals is when I had polio when I was 4, and I was put in a hospital unit for weeks. I didn't know if I'd ever see my parents. I have an anxiety, a disorder, a little bit of a disorder, I'll say it that way, when I have an abandonment issue. So when Val goes away, I get very shaky, and I have had to work with my trust issue. And it has nothing to do with her. It has to do with the fact that I get insecure when she's not there, because I still depend on that branch. I'm still overly dependent on the branch in our relationship. And that's on me to strengthen my own wings. She will often say, I'm around a wide variety of people, wide variety of women. She doesn't get insecure about that because she understands that if I breach that trust, first of all, I'm going to pay a price for that. And she understands that she can recover from that. She has actually said to me, I trust you, but I trust that if you betray that trust, I trust myself to be able to deal with it. So that extends her strength in the relationship. And this is all of our work, is to extend trust and to foster that trust in a relationship, but also strengthen our own wings so that we aren't as overly dependent. I can go on the wings of others. When we develop that trust, we can actually bring a stronger level of trust in the relationship. Because I can still go back to, I can get triggered and go back to when I was 4 years old, when I was felt abandoned, and I lost that sense of innocence. But I have to remind myself, no, I can handle this situation no matter what. I can handle it. even though I can feel like a 4-year-old. And I have to connect with my adult self. Anyway, many of you have heard my story about my West Edmonton Mall submarine adventure. So if you were in West Edmonton Mall in the 1990s and maybe early 2000s, I think they took the submarines out in early 2000s. But so this is, I have struggled all of my life, I'll just share with you, with claustrophobia. And my kids have known this. This has been a real challenge for me when I'm in close spaces. And so it was rather innocent. We spent a week at West Edmonton Mall. You got to take your kids to West Edmonton Mall probably once in their lifetime. And if nothing else, they mostly enjoyed the water park, and they did enjoy the submarine ride. And when we got into the submarine, I didn't think anything of it. This is not going to be a big deal. It goes down about 10 feet. It goes on these little tracks, and you see this little adventure with these kids. Well, as soon as the door closed, the guide that was in there said, if anybody gets claustrophobic, and as soon as she said claustrophobia, I had a full-blown anxiety attack. I actually curled up in a ball and started to shake. My hands started to shake, and I had a full-blown anxiety attack. Now, my kids understood this. They'd seen this before, and they went right to the guide and said, listen, I didn't hear the instructions, but she went immediately into her safety procedure. She had a little exit strategy. I went up, and my claim to fame is that I got rescued from a submarine in West Edmonton Mall. They have a little rowboat, and they row you to the shore, and they had a wonderful little process, a safety process, and it was all in place. It all ended up well. But here's the point of my whole story here. First of all, my kids have, we've had jokes about this, for all of my lifetime. It's always impacted. However, here's the point of my story. Many of you read my last article when I went caving with my daughters. Fast forward this West Edmonton Mall about 2 years, and we went into this cave, and I was determined. It's about an hour and a half guide. This is not hardcore caving. This is a simple little adventure into a cave. And I said to my kids, I'm going to work through this. Well, when it came time to work through this, I went to my guide, and I lost it again. I had another anxiety attack. And I said to Royce, my guide, he had his name tag on, and I said, listen, I can't do this. And he put his arm around me and said, you know what? I've been doing this every summer for years. I think he's been saying about 18 years. And he said, I've worked with lots of folks that have difficult time in closed spaces. We got you. You take the flashlight. You're going to be right up front with me, and we're going to do this together. And I trusted him. And he got me through it. And we went through an hour and a half of this, and we had this adventure. Now, why did I trust Royce? Well, he was kind. He conveyed confidence. He was human. He was present. He extended trust, and he cared. And he is my kind of benchmark for the kind of person that we put our trust in, And so 5 things I've learned about trust over the years. Trust is like oxygen. It's easy to take for granted until it's not there. Most of the relationships, think in your life of a trusting relationship. It might be a significant relationship. It might be a work relationship. Think of the relationships in your life that you would say, this is a high trust relationship. Chances are, my guess is that you haven't talked about trust lately. And that's the point that we want to get to. We want to get to the point where we can connect so freely and openly that trust is here like oxygen. You don't have to think about oxygen. It's just here. And if you're talking about it, it's probably some big concern. But when people are coming and going on teams, your customers are coming and going, you can't just take it for granted. And even in a significant relationship, you always want to have you always want to be attentive. How's the level of trust in our relationship? And bring it into some awareness. It's a delicate flower, trust is. What takes 40 years to build can be destroyed in one decision. Trust is like beauty. It's really hard to articulate, but you know when it's there. And trust is both a prerequisite and an outcome. You build trust by extending trust. So you can wait and say, I'm not going to act until I trust this person. However, you can also extend a little bit of trust and move into that relationship and manage that risk. And by you moving toward it, it can actually give you trust back. So you can actually build trust by moving toward trust. You don't just wait. I'm going to wait until I know that everybody on the street is going to not run a red light. I'm going to wait before I go through that green light. That's probably not going to be a very good strategy. We're going to talk about personal ownership under one of my strategies, and waiting just tends to not be a very good strategy. We have to extend some degree of trust to get it back. And then it does create an outcome. And my fifth thing that I know about trust is fostering trust is a lot like gardening. It's an organic, messy, evolving journey. It's not clear cut. You really don't build trust, you foster it. And in spite of our best efforts, some plants just don't turn out the way that we want, no matter how much we can bring a different presence into that relationship. Sometimes they just don't turn out the way we want. And any parent in this group understands that. So you can just put in the chat room, if you would, what do you know about trust? What's your philosophy of trust? What are some things that I might have missed here? I'm not the smartest person in the room. Leadership without trust is compliance, folks. Leadership with trust is commitment. You have to get to people's hearts before you ask them for a hand, and people buy into the leader. Then they buy into the vision. We have a leader, we have a vision, and we have a job. And how many places have you worked where we didn't have we weren't conscious of the leader, we weren't conscious of the vision, we just give people a job and wonder why they're not engaged. We've gone past that stage in life, right? So we understand. I took a course once from a cellular biologist on leadership. And what we understand is the cells in the human body have two functions, and they have to do both. They can't do both simultaneously, but cells have to do both functions in order to survive. You have to protect when you need to protect. In other words, distrust when you need to distrust, but you need to be vulnerable and open to grow. And if you want your team, your customers, the people in your life to be growing around you, that's what leadership is you have to be very mindful. Are people protecting themselves, or are we opening to a trusting relationship? You have to be very attentive to that. As I say, you're going to hear me say this more than once. A position doesn't give you more power. A position gives you more accountability. And one of the accountabilities that you have is to really watch. Are my people, the people around me, are they protecting or are they growing? So here's what mature trust looks like. And I just take this random image from a Cirque du Soleil. There's a lot of complexity in trust. There's a lot of trust in those ropes. There's a lot of trust in the relationship, in each other's skills. There's a lot of trust going on in this one little act here. And my premise is that trust, my definition of trust, it's a belief in and a reliance upon someone or something. So there's a relational component to trust. That's the belief in. I believe in you. And there's a reliance on this person. If I can't connect with you today in this hour of webinar, I can't guarantee that I'm going to connect with you, and maybe you've got something else going on. But if I haven't connected with you already, watch what I've done, my style of connecting. If I haven't connected, you're not going to believe in me. At the same time, if I show up here 20 minutes late and I'm not reliable and I'm a lousy presenter, you're not going to trust me. There's a connection component and there's a reliance component. And it's what I call, there's the heart and there's the head. There's a belief in, that's what I call connectability, and the reliance upon is accountability. And I'm going to break it down and talk about insights and strategies for how do we connect, and then how do we build accountability. So let's talk about the belief part first. Are you connecting? If you've flown as much as I have in my lifetime, you're going to eventually get asked this question. Are you connecting? This is a really important question. Are you connecting? Are you connecting with the people in your life? How is your connection? And if you're not attentive to that, there's a likelihood that trust is not being fostered. Trust is also like health. You got to keep at it. You can't just take it for granted. Well, I've done my trust. I'm just going to sit back and let it happen. I've done my work. No, you have to keep at it. It's like your health. You don't get healthy by going to the gym one day a year. You have to keep at it. You have to have health habits, just like you have to have trust habits. In fact, I never thought of that, but I'm going to add another point to my trust. It's like health. You have to keep attending to it. You have to keep asking yourself, how are my connections? You can't just take your life partner away for a weekend and expect, well, I don't have to connect anymore. As the old saying goes, I told her I loved her once, that stands until she hears otherwise. It doesn't really work quite like that. Everybody communicates, folks, but very few people in our world today actually connect. We are losing the capacity to connect. I teach university as a sessional instructor, and I'm recognizing students who have been through this pandemic, went through the pandemic, have more limited ability to really have a face-to-face conversation when their device isn't in their hands. How many times have you seen couples in a booth in a restaurant and they're each got their devices in their hands? This is probably not a first date. You'd worry about that relationship if this was their first date. But we get into old patterns, and how is that connection? So you can improve any relationship in your life by some of the reflections that I hope to leave you with. Connect before you expect. My kids taught me that, right? When I would come in and harp on them for not being accountable when I'd been gone for a couple of days, and my wife would take me aside and say, Dave, maybe you better practice what you preach. I need to connect before I expect from them. We need to have a good onboarding process where people feel that they belong in the organization, where they feel connected to the organization. They feel connected to you as a leader. If you move into a leadership role, your first job for the first 3 months is to connect, to build those relationships. Where did you learn how to connect in your life? So I want to share with you where I learned, and I would ask you, you could even put in the chat room with each other, where did you learn how to connect? We have an instinctual capacity to connect, but it's something that has to be developed. And I have to tell you, I learned to connect from my father. My dad signed up for the Second World War, but he wasn't able to enlist because of his eyesight. And so what he did is he stayed home and he worked with kids in the Rotary Club in South Calgary at the South Y. You'll see in this photograph was taken during the war. Most of the people in the back row watching are mothers whose husband were away at war. And my dad worked with these kids and when they didn't have a father in their life. And they're the unspoken hero in my mind with people who went to war. Yes, we have the veterans, but my dad was one of the heroes in my life who learned how to connect. He just had a natural ability to connect with these kids. And that ability was instilled in me. By the way, my dad is the one standing on his hands on the right. The young boy at the top is holding his feet. He's the one on the right. There's my dad. It's not a very good picture, but he would always take us camping and he related to us. He was an athlete and he really got me through. And by the way, he was my scoutmaster. We did crazy stuff, but this was a connection with my dad. He also was connected to animals. And he modeled for me. He had animals in our life, and how do you describe that when you've been taught through modeling? What does it mean to connect? You can't have trust without that sense of deep connection underneath. Here's my dad again. Shortly after the war years, my dad ended up being one of the Canadian gymnastics champion. There's my favorite picture. But my dad, when I had polio, when I came home from polio, and I was really shaky. I had the kind of virus that impacted your muscles more than your nervous system. And he would take me downstairs and he built a couple of parallel bars in the basement. And he built it brought in a mat, a tumbling mat, and he would work with me. And I could still, to this day, I can smell my dad. He'd lift me up on those parallel bars, and he would, the strength of his biceps and the strength of his shoulders and his quads. How do you get that over an internet today? He spent that time with me. He conveyed confidence in me. He was with me. I knew he was in his corner, and he wasn't doing it for his own ego. He was doing it out of the love of his heart. And that's what I got instilled in me early in my life. We do not believe in ourselves, E.E. Cummings, until someone reveals that deep inside us, something is valuable, worth listening to, worthy of our trust, sacred of our touch. Once we believe in ourselves, we can risk curiosity, we can wonder, spontaneous delight, or an experience that reveals the human spirit. You see, once you've had that given to you, that self-trust begins to foster and begins to develop. And I've always got that as my dad as a benchmark. Many people that I work with today don't have that. Many leaders are put into a leadership role and they don't have that benchmark of connection. And I would ask you to reflect on who is your benchmark and what are you doing today to really learn how to connect. You may mean some mentoring that's required for connection. Connection involves vulnerability, the foundation of connectability. Three things under vulnerability. First of all, you have to care. It's vulnerable to care, a sincere concern for the well-being of others, and the courage to share what we care about. I know we had a team meeting with Kristen and Marg, my vice president of client care this week. And Marg had just gone through some significant surgery, and she's still recovering from that surgery. And the first, it was a virtual call. We don't even think in terms of virtual teams because we just think of human beings. And Kristen spent the first 10 minutes of that session asking Marg how she was doing. That's not a technique. It's a genuine concern. And they both live in Edmonton. And Kristen extended, hey, listen, I'd love to be able, if I can, to come by and help you out as you recover from this surgery. There's a genuine concern. I know I coached a guy a while ago, and he was complaining about this team and complaining about this young generation that doesn't have a work ethic. And about 10 minutes into this complaining, I asked him, do you care? And he says, of course I care. They're not getting the results. And I said, no, do you care? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, do you care about their what they go home to? Do you care about what matters to them? Do you care about them as human beings? And he said, not really. And I said, why don't you do your organization a gift and get out of management? You don't belong here, because the responsibility of managers is to care. And people know, they know when you care. You just feel it. You can't, it's not a technique. Self-awareness, a commitment to understand how your attitudes and actions impact others. I have a very strong opinion about self-awareness from my own challenge. Don't bring your litter to your leadership. Litter, for those of you who have cats, probably don't have the cat litter box in the living room, unless you have a pretty small place. But you certainly aren't going to put it in the kitchen. You leave the litter where the litter is a part of life. So here's what we think vulnerability is. I remember coaching a young leader. She got promoted to this leadership position, and she stood up and cried to everybody. Not that there's anything wrong with tears, but she said, I feel so insecure being in this leadership role. She thought that was vulnerable. But actually what she was doing was she was expecting her team to help her feel stronger, to take the edge off of her, to help her feel more secure. That's not the job of a team. Even your life partner, that's not the job of your life partner to look after your litter. As we say in my recovery group, you don't bring your mess to your marriage. You bring your gifts and your strengths to your marriage. We all need to have a community, a structure, a process for what are you doing with your litter? And what I mean by litter is, I'm not degrading it. I'm just simply saying we have to deal with the litter in our lives, our insecurity, our self-doubt, our fears. This is all part of being a leader, but you don't have to share all of that immediately until you share it in your community. Deal with it offline, and then you bring your humanity to your leadership. And part of that might be, hey, listen, there's some gaps in my leadership. There's some insecurities, but you know what? This is what I need from you, and let's work together at building that together. That's what self-awareness is the awareness that we don't dump on people. We don't unload all of our problems on our team. You need to deal with that offline, whether it's a therapist or a support group, whatever it means, a peer mentoring group. And then humility is also an act of, of, uh, of vulnerability, where we know we aren't the smartest person in the room. And we convey that sincerely to say, I need your help. There's some people here, and get people around you who are smarter than you. Okay. The trust account. I think you're all familiar with this trust account, but be aware, as soon as you have a position of leadership, you're in the red. The trust account is, you either make every relationship is either in the black or it's in the pink. And what we need to do to build trust is to make deposits into those relationship accounts. And just know, as soon as you're in a position of leadership, you're automatically going to be a little notch down. And you have to be aware of that. And the reason I know that is because I ask people, how many of you have ever been hurt or betrayed by a person in authority, a parent, an extended family member, a teacher, a religious leader, a boss? How many of you have ever been hurt by a person in authority? And it's 100%. We've all had some kind of negative experience with a person in authority. So we're all going to be a little distrusting of our positional leader. And we have to be mindful of that and make sure we put deposits into that. Now, folks, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but the main four areas are: we need to be welcoming, appreciating, recognizing, and belonging. I'm glad you're here. Watch the ask-tell ratio. When I get anxious, I talk more. First of all, I'm anxious in this webinar, and this is my job to talk for the first hour. But even in my leadership, I notice that I will talk more when I get anxious. When results aren't happening over on our team, I'll talk more. Watch the ratio. It's no wonder that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth to listen at least twice as much as we talk. I'm glad you're here. What matters to you? These are just examples. How can I support you to succeed here? What's your experience of working here? How was your weekend? And frankly, I don't like small talk. I like to get down to work when I'm working with my team, but I have to be concerned about people and what's going on, and I have to make that room for them. How was your weekend? How safe is it to speak up here? What are your unique abilities, and how are we supporting you and to discover and express these? That is a focus for me, to say, hey, listen, are you really finding your passion here? Are you finding your unique abilities? Are we using your skills to the best of their ability? Now, to the best of your ability. Now, again, you don't have to ask all these, but this is a bit of a framework. And again, I've listed some deposits and withdrawals. You display kindness, encouragement, catching people doing things right, keeping promises, showing loyalty to the absent. Don't ever be known as a person who isn't going to gossip. Heartfelt apologies, being present, consistency. And by the way, consistency has to do with, we're going to talk next month about granting grace and noticing your own inner state more. So if you come into work, there's 2 kind of consistencies: is not sharing what kind of mood you're going to be in. That builds distrust, because people rely on people who are stronger. Regardless of whether you have a title or not, people will rely on you if you consistently come in a strong place, if you've taken good care of yourself so you can be strong. But we also notice consistencies in how you treat different people in the organization. When you watch the CEO, does the CEO treat the C-suite the same as they treat the janitor? They're the same as they treat the waiter when you go out for lunch. Watch the consistency in how you treat each other. I remember taking a course back in my university days with Steve Covey, and one of the midterm questions is, what's the name of the person who keeps this building clean? Back in my naive days, I had no idea how that had everything to do with leadership. So this person has my back. I can be vulnerable and they won't use it against me. I know they will be loyal in my absence. This person is consistent. They want what's genuinely best for me, even if it doesn't benefit them. I can be who I am around them. They can tell me the truth, and I will be here and we will be here to help deal with it, right? Confidence comes from the root confide, to trust fully. It's intuitive, this relationship piece. People won't remember what you did or what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. So in a team format, essentially, folks, what I watch for is frank, free, and direct exchange of ideas. The people freely give their thoughts. People I've seen, we've all had experiences of having the meeting and then having the meeting after the meeting. We are not taught from the time we're this tall to be direct with people in authority. How many of you have ever been bored in class? How many of you ever raised your hand and said, "Excuse me, my grade 3 teacher, but this is boring"? We're not direct with people in authority. And so what we do is that we learn to complain about it at recess. We're indirect in our communication. The number one thing that we can do as leaders is to be safe enough with it and secure enough with ourselves that we can be open for feedback, open, create a safe place where people can have a free and direct exchange of ideas. So in what areas do you need to improve your connection to others? Where are you investing in those relationships where you genuinely care, where that vulnerability is modeled in that team? Now, let me spend a couple of minutes on reliance. I just got this research from Gallup. Folks, there is always a gap between the manager's rating and the leader's rating of themselves. And what accountability ultimately is a commitment to close that gap. Don't expect there will never be a gap there. But my question for you is, are you asking the question, where can I close that gap? And take a very hard look at that. Accountability is the ability to be counted on. And what I've learned, I had no idea how learning to be accountable, and this was an original work with Jim, that how learning to work with accountability, my own accountability had such an impact on my depression. And and I spend now 20 hours a week working with recovering addicts. And what I noticed about recovering addicts is they're recovering their integrity because they have never been able to count on themselves because the addiction takes over. And what that does is it leads to self-respect and trustworthiness. When you can make a promise to yourself, when you're closing those integrity gaps, when you know what's important in your own life, and you're living your life in alignment with your own values, whether it's health, whether it's your relationships, whether it's a strong faith, that whatever you value is integrated into your life through your own personal agreements with yourself. And what that does is it builds self-respect and worthiness, trustworthiness, which leads to self-trust, which leads to trust in others. We know these kind of structures have what's on them called structural integrity, the ability of a structure, and engineers will define it this way. If there's any engineers in the crowd, this is past my pay grade, but this is my understanding of structural integrity, the ability of a structure to support a design load without breaking or collapsing. It assures that the structure will perform its design function. That's what accountability is. It gives us personal structural integrity. So here's my 7 points of accountability. Be clear about what you expect and what value you bring. You don't trust people who don't bring value. Make sure you're bringing value to the organization. Make these explicitly understood. Turn all expectation conversations into clear agreements. There's 3 kinds of conversations. There's entertaining conversations, there's learning conversations, and there's expectation conversations. And don't ever leave an expectation conversation without a clear agreement. What are we agreeing to? Think carefully before you make an agreement. Only make agreements you know you will honor. Write agreements down. I'm old school. I carry this little black book around with me. And every time I make an agreement, I write that down, put it in my device at the end of the day. Be impeccable about keeping promises and have a recovery process. Let your creditor know as soon as you know if your agreement is jeopardized. Negotiate with your creditor at this point to minimize damages and recommit to new agreement and learn from your experience so that it doesn't happen again. We're all human and life is going to happen, but let's make sure whenever we make a promise, we have a creditor that we owe that to. Let me, in the last 15 minutes, give you 3 strategies for fostering trust. Number 1 is to be intentional. Number 2 is take ownership. And number 3, be a person of impeccable character. I'm going to do the best I can to talk about what it means to be a person of character in a short amount of time. I won't do it justice, but let me give you these 3. A trust inventory with your team. Here's a fun exercise. just go back to your team, whatever that team is. Maybe it's an internal team, maybe it's your family, maybe it's your significant other, and just say, I want to have some fun with this. I know I want to build more trust. I want to be mindful of this. So ask your team, why is trust important here? And what level of trust is required? And what does it optimally look like? So, for example, if you have a hockey team, I go back to a sports metaphor, a hockey team requires more trust than a baseball team. So you have to ask yourself, what level of trust are we needing on this team for us to get our work done? What's the level of interdependence that we have? And you just brainstorm and put it on a whiteboard. We want to be relaxed. We want to have fun. We enjoy working together. We care about each other. We're honest with each other. We listen to each other. We're consistent. We show. So this would be an example of what the team would come up with for what trust would look like. And then you ask your team on a scale of 1 to 10, what number would you give our team at this time? And I always watch the worst numbers you'll ever get are fives, because those are numbers that I call safe. And they're indicators. There's always a yellow flag for me when those numbers come up, because people are they really there? Are they just playing it safe? Are we really genuine, or are we just being polite? The worst thing you can do, the worst indicator of a lack of trust is polite. We are Canadians after all, but we want to get past polite to really being genuine. So what number? And then thank them. Thank them for their feedback regardless. And maybe they're honest, maybe they're not. That's not your problem. Your problem is to ask the question and be curious. What actions could I take as a leader that would move our score up one notch in the next week or the next month? What do you want me to stop doing? What do you want me to start doing? What do you want me to continue doing? What would work for you? What am I doing as a leader to build trust? Or what am I doing as a leader to take that to diminish trust on this team? And start with small actions. And even if people don't feel super safe, maybe they're distrusting, just take it one little step at a time. What matters here is that you're genuinely interested in this. What actions could each of us take to move our score up one notch in the next month or the next week? What could each of us stop, start, and continue to do? How can we have a shared ownership to this? And then finally, what agreements will we make to each other? Consider developing what I call a team trust charter, where you list your agreement, your expectations of each other, you list your agreements, and then you work out a process. How do we deal with it when people don't meet our don't keep our promises inadvertently or directly? Most of it will be unintentional, but how will we deal with that? And you come up with a team charter that's it can be a page long, and we can talk about that afterwards. My second strategy is to take ownership. Take ownership. It's so easy to complain about what's not here, as opposed to taking responsibility to say, hey, we can each make this team better. Waiting is not a good strategy. We all play a part in building trust here. And how am I contributing to the problem that I'm complaining about? This is an accountable question, is to say, what's my part in this? And maybe I need to be more trusting. Maybe I need to reach out and build more relationships. Maybe I need to make more deposits in the trust account on our team here. What can I personally do? What's within my sphere of control? Yeah, we've got a lot of concern that we don't have as much trust as we need to, but what's my part in making that different? I call it the law of the echo. Whatever you want in a relationship, bring it. If whatever we expect in a relationship, bring what we expect. The law of the echo says whatever we give will come back to us tenfold. Maybe not right away, but if you want more trust in a relationship, bring more trust to a relationship. Bring more trustworthiness to it. Bring more accountability. Bring more connectability to that relationship. And this is a fundamental principle of the leadership that I teach. I want, just in the last few minutes, to spend a few minutes here on character. And this is a tough one to explain, but I'm going to do the best I can. We could spend a whole hour just on character. So first thing around character is to understand that our intent leads to our impact. Now, what really matters is the impact. And we may have an impact that is different than our intent. But what we can always control is to be very clear about what intent that we bring to that leadership. Strong character is guided by a moral compass and an intention to serve the greater good. Ask people why they sought. I often do this in my leadership programs. What brought you to being a leader? Why do you want to be a leader? Some people don't even seek a promotion, but they seek bringing value, and they continually are committed to serving the greater good. And so when they get promoted to being a leadership, to being in a position of leadership, their commitment is to use that position, to have accountability, to use that position to leverage service in the organization, to make the people, to build capacity around them. You can always, and you just know this when you look in the mirror at night and ask yourself, what is your motive for seeking leadership? And it's to make the world better. And if you're going to, and even if you're humble enough to say, I would never seek leadership, chances are you get promoted because you're committed to service. And so you're willing to step into a leadership role, or you can even seek a leadership role if you are committed to service. I was just working with a CEO this week who runs a co-op, and he's got about 300 employees. I'm going to go in and work with his co-op. And I said, why did you, he started on, I think he started serving gas, right, in the co-op. And I said, did you seek to be a CEO? And he says, well, I don't know that I always sought to be a leader. I was just always wanting to be a leader. And I said, why? And he said, it's all about the people. It's all about wanting to make the people better. This is a person of strong character. Now, there's many aspects of character. I'm going to focus on this. Here's what weak character is. They're guided by self-interest, a hidden agenda, and a motive to use people to get what you want. And they're into self-service. And it's very difficult in this world where we see the easy leaders to see are people who aren't leaders at all, but they're politicians. Big difference between a politician and a leader. There are some politicians that I would call leaders, but the challenge is when we see this modeled in our whole society by the people who are out front, who use their position of leadership for their own personal gain, this is a person that I call a weak leader. And I'm going to be very personal about this. Don't use your position of power to deal with your leader. Now, what do I mean by that? Insecurity, fears, doubts are all part of being human, and they're part of being a leader. But what weak character is that you use your position to deal with that. For example, here's an example that I have seen a lot in my life in the last 40 years, is when you hire, for example, a young, beautiful woman, you bring her into that role so that she will stroke your ego so that you don't feel as insecure. Folks, it's irresponsible, it's unacceptable, and it's immoral. You have a responsibility when you are in a position of leadership to use that position to serve the greater good, to serve the people that work with you, not to use that position to deal with your own unacknowledged dark side. Now, I'm going to speak specifically to the white males who are privileged on this call. I see this often. Yes, it's true everywhere, but it's particularly true among us men, that we have to really be attentive to our intent and watch what we are bringing to our leadership. And I am just at a point in my career where I just need to say this because I see it so rampant in our society. And I'm going to just leave it there for us to really take a look at, okay? The moment there is suspicion about a person's motive, everything they do becomes tainted and will diminish that trust. Mahatma Gandhi. Folks, a person cannot do right in one department of life while being occupied in doing wrong in another department. One life is one indivisible whole. If you lack integrity in any area of your life, it will contaminate every area in your life, and it will contaminate your commitment to build trust. All right. On that note, I'm going to just leave you a little call to action. I've given you a kind of a, uh, a fire hose of information today. I hope that I've given you something to reflect on. Ask yourself where you need to make deposits in the trust account around you. And by the way, just pick one of these that you can reflect on and take action on. Take a look at the integrity gaps and the blind spots in your life, and go and get some help with those blind spots. If your intent isn't quite there, if you've got a lot of fears, no problem. Deal with those offline. Take those to a structure, a community beyond you. Reflect on how your immature trust or distrust is impacting your relationships. And just so if you're not trusting another person, look inside first and say, do I need to build stronger wings? Is this how much of this is on me and how much of it is on the other person? Find ways to be accountable. Don't ever make a promise you don't intend to keep. Take a trust inventory with your team. Bring to your relationships what you want from your relationships. Get so busy, instead of complaining that you're not getting enough appreciation at work, get so busy appreciating people that you don't have time to feel your own lack of appreciation. Examine your motives and find a community to bring your litter to. All right. Uh, find somebody, a therapist, a team. And on that note, I'll just share with you, I'd like to put a little reminder. We do run a peer support group that helps people hold each other accountable. It's a safe space where we support authenticity, growth, and excellence, where people can come and just be real. And if you're interested in pursuing what that would look like, please stay on afterwards, or feel free to reach out to myself, through Val, through any of the emails that have come through our office. And just a little plug here for our little podcast with my daughter. Thanks to Kristen for your help in helping us rebrand this. It used to be the Leaders Navigator, but I thought, no, we just get off onto so many topics. It's really about being more human together. If you want to get to know myself and my daughter, we have some great conversations. And I'll just invite you to our next webinar next Friday, April 24th. We're going to talk about granting grace in a reactive world. And on that note, folks, I'm going to feel free to reach out, by the way, if you need any support or anything that came up for you today you'd like to follow up with, feel free to reach out to Val. And on that note, I'm going to stop sharing, and we're going to stop the recording.